All right. Well, here we are. We are live and prime time. To hell with the MLB All Star game. I got something better for you. I got a longtime pal joining me on the show in rare form, I might add. We got you with the full Ryan Fitzpatrick beard. How about them
Brian,
apples?
Brian,
Try
hey,
it.
full on. Nothing.
Erik Ellis joining me on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I was going to have you join me via phone, but I thought, you know what? No, we're going to do this right. We're going to do this the way that we've done it with all the guests before. Grace me with your presence, me seeing the beard, me seeing the face. And folks, you see on the bottom of the screen, longtime pal. We go way back, first grade, Chuck Upson, Lockport, New York. Named his dog after Stephon Diggs, a golden retriever, I might add. How is the dad life? There he is. There he is.
Yeah,
How
I
is
mean,
the dog dad life going for you, Erik, to start the show?
pretty good, honestly. He's a great dog. He's smart, loyal, and he knows a few tricks. So he's trying to keep up with his namesake. He likes to dig as well. So it's a double situation with Stephon Diggs and digging holes. So kind of works out.
So that was why you named him Diggs, because he was digging holes in the backyard.
No, actually, it was just because we wanted to do a Bills name for him, and honestly, we're torn between Diggs, Knox, and Fitzy. But Diggs just kind of like stuck, and when I met him for the first time at the breeder, he actually was digging up some of the garden that he was around. So Diggs kind of did stick because of the digging, but also just because he kind of reminds me of Diggs because he brings me so much happiness.
So the only thing that's left, I made this joke when I met Diggs, is I got to get a dog and name him after this guy,
Yeah,
right?
Ellen. Yeah,
It's the only thing that get, get maybe like get like a chocolate lab or something like that and name him Alan. That's just a thought, just to change it up. Maybe get another golden retriever to add to the team. Why
hey,
not?
cool. That'd be awesome. You're playing
Yeah,
fantasy
the
football.
most yeah, right. Most of the time, people that tune in and follow me on social media, they know I'm a cat guy. But down the road, I won't turn a blind eye to getting a dog. Just leaving something for the viewers to tune into at a later time. Not now, but eventually. But as much as I'd love to talk about dogs all show long, I wanted to have you on
All right.
to discuss the Buffalo Bills season that is upon us. First and foremost, I wanted to get us training camp tickets. That was a goal. We'd been to training camp year in, year out, these last few years prior to COVID. We got to see LaShawn McCoy's debut at training camp. We got to meet Kyle Williams, Marcel Darius back in the day. And as great a moment as those were, obviously, this season's different. This season hits different. The expectations are through the roof for the Bills this season. But I'm a little bit ticked off, and I wanted you to join me in on being ticked off because I know we are equally as ticked off with the whole fact that this Bills training camp fumble, if you will, just completely has been mishandled in terms of the training camp, in terms of how fans were asked to get tickets, how we all had to sign on the app at the same exact time, at the same exact minute, and sit in a line for tickets. How frustrated are you over just the training camp ticket situation to start the show? And talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on the stadium that we are about to have probably in the next couple years here across the street from the current stadium on Abbott Road.
Well, in terms of the training camp, I'm equally as mad as you are. Honestly, it's just such a cluster that I I just can't believe it went about this way. You think that you could even get them on like secondary, third markets. These tickets, if you want to ticket practices, especially prime time ones like the weekends, I get it. I understand you want to make a buck, but you got to make it more available than you have. You can't just allow like the only like one or two people to get like 10 tickets and then they have to charge top dollar or give them to their friends or family. it's just not fair for the average fan who really has other things going on. The tickets get released at a certain time, and not everyone has that accessibility to obtain those tickets. So it just kind of stinks because you and I both know, like, we enjoy going to St. John Fisher for training camp. It's always a fun time, always a good experience, and it's always cool to see, like, getting Rochester involved. And that gives it more of an opportunity for people outside of, like, Western New York to see the Bills. If you're from Syracuse and you're a fan, you can go to Rochester. It's only an hour and a half, maybe even an hour away. If you're from the lower areas of New York, you can come up to Rochester too and see them. It's so much easier just to do it that way. And I think that's the one good thing about St. John Fisher, having a training camp there, because it's just not everybody wants to drive all the way to Buffalo sometimes just for a training camp. So that it was one aspect of the whole thing that I did enjoy. So not to be undone, they have to obviously make it more difficult this year, because now that COVID's kind of taking a little bit of a back seat, they're no longer doing like the spring training camp at Orchard Park. They're trying to incorporate St. John Fisher again, which I think is good, but it's very annoying, like you said, after this year, which has been kind of a pain, and I wish we could still go, but maybe things will change and things will get a little bit better, and there'll be an alternative way to get tickets, but I don't know yet. In terms of the stadium, I am excited for that. I don't know if this might be another long tangent. I think a new stadium's long overdue for the Bills. It's been a long time coming. The Ralph, I'll always call it the Ralph, has always been like one of my favorite like places to go, like in Buffalo, just because it's been such a storied stadium, and it's like one of the original stadiums around. They've updated it, they've made renovations to it, but it's long past due that Buffalo gets a new stadium. I don't know if I'm too crazy about the concept yet, because I haven't seen the final like blueprint for what it's going to be. I know it's still going to be open air. How much open air, I don't know. I'm hoping it's kind of similar to Miami Stadium, where there's a little bit of an opening, but most of it's covered. So it will help deter a lot of the wind factor and the weather that could potentially cause a lot of issues with the stadium that have been going on with Ralph Wilson Stadium, especially after this year, where you've had some of the worst home weather games in recent memory. I think there's only been one game this year that has been fine, and I think that was the Commanders game, where it was probably 70 degrees and sunny. Everything else has been rainy, cloudy, snowy, or below 10 degrees. So.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. As far as the Bills training camp, I wanted to ask you kind of a two-parter there, because the Bills training camp is an experience that is solely for fan enjoyment, as well as obviously that's the opportunity to where the team gets together for the first time in the off season and tries to perfect their craft. We know all that, but that's a very, I guess I could say, intimate setting in terms of the fans are close to the action. You can get that Hard Knocks style feel of training camp that we know and love from the HBO show, but up close and personal, where you have guys that are trying like heck to make the 75-man roster, guys that are trying like heck to make the 53-man roster. And let's face it, back in the day when we would go see Trent Edwards and J.P. Lossman compete against one another for the quarterback job, those days are long gone. This team is so deep that it's going to be very tough for these guys to make this team that are on the outside looking in, but they're essentially auditioning for other roles on other teams while auditioning to possibly be a member of the Buffalo Bills. It's a completely different situation to where we are now compared to where we were. And it blows my mind in terms of what I call it as the Bills training camp ticket fumble. In terms of, like, that's an opportunity for the fans to be close to the action, but it's also an opportunity for local businesses to be promoted by selling Bills training camp tickets. Tops Markets, Wegmans, Dave and Adams, all sorts of different businesses that sell training camp tickets that don't even sell them. They give them away. But it's nice PR for the Buffalo Bills to build that sense of community as they always have, and as we love them for. And the fact that they didn't really do that this time around, it struck me as odd, and it obviously frustrated the hell out of me, being that I was on the app right when they told me to be. Right when they told me to be, I was told that I was in a line of 3,000 people. And we've been there. We know how many people can fit in that whole situation at St. John Fisher, it's not 3,000. I mean that's a lot of people. If there is 3,000 people there, man, that's got to be an all-time high in terms of attendance at a Bills training camp. So, yeah, I really wish they would have handled it better. I hope that they change it. And as far as the Bills Stadium goes, you've gone to more Bills games in the last 2 years than I can even count. You without being a season ticket holder, you've gone to way more games than I have. And there was a situation last season. I want to paint the picture for the fans out there that tune into the show. They know that I do the post game shows and I'm podcasting and talking about the team. And I follow the team on a day to day, obsessively, beyond obsessive basis, right? But when you call me and say, hey, Ryan, I got an extra ticket for a Buffalo Bills game in December and they're playing the Atlanta Falcons, I'm thinking, man, this is a winnable game. I want to go because I know that they can win this game. But then I look out the window and it's raining in December and it's, 25 degrees outside. That's the part that just blows my mind. It's not the fact that they put the stadium in Orchard Park. I don't mind that. I like to go out to Orchard Park just as well as you do. But in terms of the weather, in terms of enjoying the prolonged season of 18 weeks and 8 or 9 home games, however many it is nowadays, more often than not, those are in piss poor weather. You get one or two that are in really good weather. And now you look at the schedule in terms of how it can impact the weather in this season at home for the Buffalo Bills fans. These games are mostly on prime time to start, where week 5 is the only home game that is at Sunday at 1 o'clock to within the first, it takes up until, late October or whenever that week 5 game is, mid to late October against Pittsburgh, for the Buffalo Bills to have a Sunday game at 1 o'clock. And by then the weather is not really that warm in Western New York anyway. So I'm expecting the weather to play more of a factor than it even did last year. And to your point, you were there at the New England Patriots playoff game. If that wasn't a playoff game, I just want to ask you this question. If that was not a AFC divisional round playoff game, would you go to that game again? Would you if that was a regular season game, just a divisional game, week 14, week 13, Bills, Patriots. Would you do that again under those weather conditions?
I mean, if they could clinch the division by then, maybe. that's
Right.
probably it, man. But no, outside of that, man, I like the experience just because it's not something I enjoy doing like regularly, but to try and fight off the conditions and you're wearing 2 or 3 layers, you're wearing heat packs and it's not something I enjoyed doing, but it's for the experience. It was okay, but overall, no. I mean, I ideally would like to go into a stadium that's controlled for the most part. I don't mind a little bit of coldness if there has to be, but like this past year, I went to New Orleans and I went to the Caesar Dome down there. Stadium was beautiful. It was covered, and I get it's apples to oranges in terms of where we are and where New Orleans is and the situation there compared to here. But it baffles me that they want to spend all this money on a new stadium, and they want to put in all this different things that can actually improve it and improve the fan experience, I guess. And there's a part of me that hopes that the stadium will lead to other things. Like there's been rumors that this can lead that the stadium is going to be designed after a Major League Soccer team kind of stadium. So the idea that maybe Major League Soccer could come back to Buffalo in some form would be cool. But even with that in mind, it still wouldn't be ideal for me at least if the stadium was still open air. I don't really mind having some elements in football just because the experience can sometimes be good. But overall, you see all these other teams that are talking about making improvements to their stadium. Like Chicago's talking about putting a dome on top of their current stadium. You've got the Browns that have talked about redoing a stadium entirely and putting a dome on that. And it baffles me that New York State and Buffalo in general has kind of been like, we're going to keep the open air concept. which, like I said, it can work in most circumstances, but you have to understand when you're on the border of Lake Erie, you're going to get some bad weather. So they really should have taken that into account and, work the design around that, which I hope it can be a little bit of both, somewhat like a in between dome slash, open air concept, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it does make sense, and it makes even more sense as a business owner, especially if you're, Terry and Kim Pagula, who, yeah, they bought the team in 2014 when nobody anticipated it, nobody saw it coming, and they paid $1.4 billion. That's with a B, billion for the Buffalo Bills. They spent a lot of Pagula bills for the Buffalo Bills, far more than what they were worth to keep the team here, and I'm appreciative of them for that. I appreciate the fact that they kept the team here 100%. But if you're a business owner, which they are, they own two major businesses in one area, the Bills and the Sabres, you would think that they would want to maximize their return in any which way humanly possible. And the best way to maximize their return is to put a dome on the stadium, because you have 8 dates for the Buffalo Bills, 8 home games, and instead you could have 20 or 25 or 30, depending on the amount of bands, music, whatever you want to call it, entertainment options that you could have in a dome setting, which... that's the part for me that just blows my mind. I have tickets to see Metallica on August 11th at the stadium. I've never seen a concert at the Ralph, as we like to call it. I've never seen a concert there. I'm very much looking forward to it. But the thought that they only have had these major bands, and there's only so few left, but these major bands at an outdoor venue in a stadium setting, and it's the first time they've really done it in a long time. They took a lot of years off from doing that until the Pagulas bought the team. The Wilsons didn't do any of that. They didn't get involved in any of that. They wanted it to be only the home of the Buffalo Bills. Whereas the Pagulas, I really thought that they would be more modern in terms of their ownership, as they have been, by putting Kim in charge. She's really the most powerful woman in the NFL in terms of the control that she has over the day-to-day operations of the team, as well as the Sabres in the NHL. Yeah, that's my biggest gripe. It's not the fact that the stadium is in Orchard Park. I wanted it in Orchard Park, to be quite honest with you. Would I prefer it to be in Buffalo in an ideal world, as you mentioned? I would say so. But we know that that's not going to happen. We go to Buffalo all the time. We know how jam-packed it is with just Salem Field and KeyBank and all the other stuff that's going on in the area. There's a lot of awesome businesses that are doing really, really well, and I'm happy about that, because we graduated high school, not to date ourselves, 12 years ago. Those businesses weren't even there. They didn't even exist. So that just goes to show you, the growth that the community has seen. But how much growth could it have if a Bills stadium was... it'd be mind-blowing, but... That's a mistake that they made, 55 plus years ago, however many years it's been, to put the stadium in Orchard Park instead of Buffalo. And it's a mistake that they just can't, they can't wash their hands of it. So it is what it is. Mark Poloncarz said that, not me. So I just for the fact that, politicians in this area admit that, okay, yeah, we did make a mistake 50 plus years ago to put the stadium there. There's not a whole lot we can do about it. We just have to make the same mistake twice to put the new stadium there. But when the new stadium is here, I guarantee Bills Mafia that it will be worth the wait. I have a strong feeling that the area will see a surge in jobs that is much needed. I just got a report that Amazon is opening a distribution center, a massive distribution center in Lockport, which is huge for Niagara County and huge for this area. So, little by little, I do think businesses are returning to Western New York and building in Western New York, because there is opportunity to have business here. So, we'll see how that works. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that. I know we talk about it a lot, and I wanted to kind of share those thoughts for the viewers and listeners. I feel like it's an important topic. I know there's a lot of Bills fans that are back and forth on this stadium thing still, but hey, it is what it is, right?
It is. It is. I mean, you gotta take the good with the bad. Unfortunately, we're gonna get taxed with this new stadium. The new reality of the situation is that these owners, these billionaires, they don't want to fork out all of their own money to do this, even though they'll reap benefits. The Haslams in Cleveland, they want to build a new stadium, but they want a majority of the money to come from Cleveland. So they're following the Pagulas suit in that way. But like I said, you have to take the good with the bad. You're gonna have to pay the money to keep this team here, but you have to understand this is a $1 billion franchise. The NFL is a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that is going to bring so much business, like you said, to the area. Like we're repping Bill stuff right now, you and I.
Right.
The Bills, they don't stay in Buffalo, they go somewhere else. Imagine if Bon Jovi had bought the Bills and moved them to Toronto. Do you think anybody would want to be a Bills fan at that point, besides maybe a couple of Torontoans? Like, no, I wouldn't rep the Buffalo Bills at that point. Nobody around here would probably want anything to do with it. As much as I love Canada, I don't want to represent a football team that should have been here. Ralph Wilson put the Buffalo Bills here. Last thing I want is to see them go to Canada or Austin, Texas, or whatever the case is. These are the Buffalo Bills, and this is what we want. This is what we need for the community. And I know people, like you said, will complain. We have other needs and other desires for the community, but the Buffalo Bills are the community. They are what represents Western New York, because they strive, they worked hard towards what they are now, and now you have a Super Bowl contender. And teams that win the Super Bowl tend to have huge, huge revenue, like in the community in general. Can you imagine a Super Bowl parade here in Buffalo? How many people would come throughout the entire nation to just support it? New bars, new restaurants, new businesses. It would just be insane. And that's what I'm kind of just hoping for with this
Right.
whole thing that's going to happen. I hope they win the Super Bowl before they get a new stadium, ideally, no matter what. But that's just what I'm hoping for. It's just if that when that day happens, it will lead to even more growth in Buffalo, and it will be a place people do want to come to, despite the weather or anything like that.
Yeah, I agree with the fact that you said something that I think is pretty a statement that rings true, is that the Buffalo Bills are the community. Like that is what unites Western New Yorkers among Western New Yorkers. Like that's the one common thread that everybody shares that lives in this area, is that for the most part, unless you're Zach Troutwine, you're a Buffalo Bills fan. Shout out to Zach. Yeah, I went on my podcast and I did one solo, and I was talking about Baker Mayfield and him going to Carolina, and man, I'm glad the Bills got it right, man.
Yeah.
Oh, glad I'm not a Carolina Panthers fan.
Oh,
So, with that being said, I want to ask. You mentioned the fact that the Bills were in Toronto, playing games in Toronto, and all that. Like, what if Bon Jovi bought the team? Do you remember like going out, like when we first really started going out to bars in the area when we were 21, and they had like, I don't know if they were still doing the Toronto thing then, but I remember we went out to a bar to watch a Bills game in Toronto. I remember that specifically. Do you remember that? They're playing Washington?
maybe.
Yeah. Do you remember how, like, at that time, like, we feared the fact that the Bills were actually going to move because no one was interested in buying the team? Like, nobody with deep enough pockets. At the time, the Pagulas didn't even exist. Like, the thought of the Pagulas, no one even, they weren't even a thing at the time. And Ralph dips his toes in putting the team in Toronto for a game to take a home game away from the fans. Nobody liked it in this area. We just tolerated it. And we were all fearful that it would actually be successful because they pitched it like, oh, Toronto is starving to watch an NFL football team, even though the Bills hadn't made the playoffs in like 15 years. And thank God the Bills sucked at that time in actuality, because if the Bills were as good as they are now then, we might have had some problems. Like that was a real risky time. And the fact that they didn't do that well in those games, they'd lose pretty much every single one of those games with the exception of a couple. I'm thankful because I think that's one of the major reasons why the Bills are here and here to stay for a very long time. But yeah, what are your like going back to like when we were in high school? Like, what are some of your fondest slash worst memories as a Bills fan? Like, what are ones that really stand out? Like, we got to go through the misery before we talk about the good
Oh,
things. Unfortunately,
one of the worst things. Oh my gosh, I can't even. I can't even think about it. It just. I mean, I remember the Trent Edwards year. That was one of the ones where I just wanted to be like, I thought he was the guy for the longest time. He got that concussion in the Cardinals game, and just he was captain checkdown after that. My my least favorite game I think I remember from the drought was that Jacksonville game in London, where EJ Manuel had 3 turnovers, one half, and I was like, and they all were like, pick sixes or fumbles returned for a touchdown. And I'm like, there's no way they come back. And they actually managed to come within 5 minutes of winning that game. And then they had a phantom pass interference call. And I'm like, what?
Ron Brooks. I remember that. It was Ron. They called it on Ron Brooks, and he was nowhere
Yeah.
near the receiver. It was horrible.
Yeah.
It was one of the worst calls ever.
Oh, so bad. I was like, where were you even looking? Where did you see that? I think these referees sometimes.
I think I was at your house. I think I was texting you during that game because it was in London. It was on during the morning, and I was texting you, and I'm like, this is absolutely screwed.
I turned it off at the halftime. I just couldn't do it. I was like, no, this is not for me. And I mean, this is still part of the year technically, so I will include it. But the Nate Peterman, of course, like 5 interception game, because technically they did make the playoffs that year, but it was still prior to that, so it does count. So having that as like, we thought Nate Peterman could have been, and then he threw 5 interceptions.
Right. That I remember the interceptions were like so bad, like the anticipation, like on the throws, one like dinged off somebody's helmet, one bounced story of Nathan Peterman is the fact that we go back to the preseason of like that season, and he was like dynamite. Like he was like 38 of 42 in a game, or like fantastic. Obviously, he's playing against backups, but it gave you like, okay, this guy is getting better, and then they'd play him, and he was horrible. It was the training camp, and I want to tell the story because this is one that's definitely that you partook in with me. We went to the training camp the year that Allen was a rookie, and I thought at that time that he was not only the best quarterback that they had between himself and A.J. McCarron and Nathan Peterman, I thought he was one of the best players on their team. And I remember thinking like, am I overzealous thinking this? Like, am I pushing the envelope? Like, if I go out and tweet this, if I go out and say this, people are going to think that I could really fall flat on my face. If Josh Allen doesn't work out, I either look like a dumbass, or if he does work out, I look pretty smart. And like thinking that in that moment, and he looked really good. The offense actually moved the chains during those practices to the point where after that practice we went to, LaShawn McCoy signing stuff for fans, and then LaShawn McCoy talks to the media, and LaShawn McCoy was like the first person, before Sean McDermott even, before Brandon Beane, the first person to like openly acknowledge how great Josh Allen could become. Like this guy's a real one. This guy's a stud. This guy's athletic. And then they have Nathan Peterman start that rookie that 2018 season. They're losing like 40-7.
Oh yeah.
They put Josh Allen in, and his first pass is a first down. This guy is the toasted son. He very well be this year if everything goes according to plan. So just give me your thoughts on, you know, what your thoughts were on Allen and moving forward to now. You know, going back to that draft, I want to go back there because I think it's a fun place to go back to for Bills fans. Looking at Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold now on one team, and obviously Josh Rosen and Lamar Jackson, and just that class. Like, take
Yeah.
me back to where your head was at during that time.
I hate to admit it, but I had to think about what the talking heads of like all sports analysts were thinking at the time, and everyone thought that Josh Allen had all the potential in the world. He had all the tools you're looking for in a quarterback, but he was so raw, and he just needed to be molded into what he is now. I always knew he had that ability to be that way, but you and I both know the Buffalo Bills don't have the best history of developing these guys into that. So when they did draft Josh Allen, I wasn't thrilled because I was like, oh boy, this is another situation where you get a guy who could definitely be an elite quarterback, but it's going to take some time. He's not going to come out of the gate and light the world on fire. Um, so I was skeptical just because as Bills fans we're conditioned to expect the best, but know the worst is coming. So first year happens. I don't really, I see some potential, but nothing that's like really, you know, crazy. Like the Chargers game happened, he started. I was like, okay, some little bits here and there. And then I think when the Vikings game, the third game of the season happened, I really saw Josh Allen as this otherworld athlete. He scrambled for that touchdown in the first quarter. He was throwing passes to I think Jason Kroom for touchdowns and leaping Anthony Barr. And I was like, I can't believe this guy is who he is. This is an athlete. This is a monster, man. I was so impressed. I was like, if he could get his throwing mechanics and pocket presence down, this guy could be the best quarterback in the league. And that was the game where I thought Josh Allen has got the potential to be that guy. For the rest of the class, though, I mean, I bought into the Darnold and Rosen hype a little too much. In all fairness to them, though, unfortunately, they went to bad situations. And I'm not trying to make excuses for them at all.
That's a fact. That's a fact. I can't dispute that. The situations are horrible.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely horrible.
Oh, yeah. They went to Adam Gase, and then I don't think it was Cliff Kingsbury at the time. I think it was I'm blanking on the name for the coach there. But the situation for the Cardinals was awful. And you put Rose in the situation, and he's not going to thrive. No one's really going to thrive anyways. But Kyler Murray is a great quarterback, and he thrives. So at the end of the day, you got to realize, Rosen and Darnold, they got to fight through the circumstance and show that they can still be, a good quarterback. And unfortunately, certain times you can't overcome your circumstance, or certain times you succeed despite it. And in this situation, unfortunately, Darnold and Rosen both showed, we only are as good as the situation can allow us to be. And even in those, it doesn't show that they can be these guys that will be franchise quarterbacks. It's been shown now at this point that Darnold and Rosen are probably career backups. They'll probably last in the NFL for another 2 or 3 years, depending. But Mayfield will probably be maybe about the same. Maybe he finds a job as a starter somewhere else. And Jackson is an interesting prospect in terms of like, does he get the money that he deserves? I mean, if Deshaun Watson gets this $230 million guaranteed contract, I mean, doesn't Lamar Jackson deserve something similar to that? Right? I would imagine. I would hate for him to leave the Ravens when it's like, he's got a good fit there. He's got a good scheme. It's working. You win with this guy. Pay him the money he really deserves, and draft a good line around him so he's not going to get crushed before the time he's 26.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think over the course of what you were saying, I'm thinking to myself just at that time, Darnold and Rosen were looked at so highly, all just based on evaluators thinking like, oh, Darnold plays for USC. He's played top level competition. Oh, Josh Rosen, he played for UCLA. He's played against top level competition. Whereas Josh Allen, the biggest knock on him was the school that he came from in Wyoming. And I'm not going to sit here, I should say, and say, oh my God, I knew that a quarterback from Wyoming would end up being the best quarterback in a quarterback draft class. I'd be nuts to say that. Anyone would be nuts to say that or say that they said that. No one was saying that. No one was saying that he was going to be what he has become at this current point. But what I will say is that's a problem with like the evaluation process that has changed actually since Allen. That you do see guys like Trey Lance get drafted in the first round from a small school. You do see guys that are just looked at just solely based on what their talent is and what they can provide, nothing else. And I think that is a huge evaluation flaw in the system that I think Josh Allen is one of the many guys that one of the first guys at quarterback, but one of the many guys overall that has kind of worked towards correcting that. Like, hey, yeah, I played at a small school, but just because I came from a small area is why I came to a small school, why I wasn't noticed, and why a small school was the only school that really saw me was because I came from a small area. I just watched the first episode of The Captain about Derek Jeter, and you look at baseball as a seasonal sport. You know, like kids that are playing baseball in Florida and playing at a high level, you have a hotbed of baseball in Florida because it's an all year round sport down there. Whereas Derek Jeter coming from Kalamazoo, Michigan, baseball is a month or two at most in Michigan with how terrible the weather is, being that they're off of Lake Michigan. He wasn't really able to showcase himself in the way that other athletes could, and I'd make the same argument for Allen in terms of just coming from a small town, Wyoming being the only school that really saw him as anything, let alone a starter. And that the rest is history, So it's fun to go back and look at that. And to your point on Lamar Jackson, for as much as Josh Allen has been like a match made in heaven for Buffalo and then some, I would say the Lamar Jackson pick has turned out pretty damn good for the Baltimore Ravens. And I'm not saying it in terms of me loving Lamar Jackson. I think he's a great, he's shown greatness. He's shown he could be really good. He's shown he could be really great. But he's also shown that he can be inconsistent. And the fact that you mentioned Deshaun Watson, if if there's any quarterback that deserves a raise outside of Allen, it's most definitely Lamar Jackson in terms of what he's provided the Ravens and the stability at the position, because that's what every team wants. Whereas, what did Deshaun Watson do to earn that money? That's the question that I'll be asking myself to the day I die. I don't understand why the Cleveland Browns not only made that trade, the trade, reading it makes me sick to my stomach, but what they gave up to get him, but then what they paid him. Like, right. I want to talk to you about that as we shift gears here, and we'll get into the Bills, obviously, but what were your thoughts on Watson going to the Browns and what happened to Mayfield? Because that is within the 2018 quarterback draft class.
I think, for what it's worth, Baker Mayfield just got dealt a terrible hand. The Browns are a terrible franchise. They're a terrible run organization. They just never have found success. They are very lucky that the NFL hasn't adapted to the draft lottery, because they've gotten the good fortune of having the first overall pick, for better or worse, multiple times. So they've been able to build a stellar team for the franchise, for the team. You get Myles Garrett, you get Denzel Ward, you get Nick Chubb. You get all these guys who are like studs. And you keep getting it wrong with the coach, with the GM, and the owner who just likes to stick his nose where it really shouldn't be. And it just happens that Baker Mayfield has the moxie that you like. And I'm not saying Baker Mayfield was bad or is not a good quarterback, but I mean, I don't think he was worthy of the number one overall pick. I don't think so. But I definitely don't think that he was bad either. I think you gave him a bad coach in his first year, for sure.
Freddie Kitchens, what the hell?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Second year, definitely not much better. And you put him with Kevin Stefanski the third year, he has his best year yet, for sure. And then year four happens, and he's injured. He gets hurt. I'm not going to say he's going to light the world on fire if he didn't get hurt, but that plays a big factor in things. You're only as good as your availability and your ability. And when both kind of coincide and cause issues, people are going to look at you that way. And Odell Beckham Jr. saw that, and he wanted out of Cleveland, and Cleveland said, "Okay, well, we'll get you out." And the Rams picked him up, and he's a Super Bowl champion now. And I'm not saying it has anything to do with Baker necessarily. I think Baker still is a decent quarterback, but there's a reason why he wanted out of Cleveland, and that's because Baker is not a top 5, maybe not even a top 10 guy. There's other quarterbacks I would take before Baker Mayfield for sure. And I think Cleveland felt the same way. They thought, we have this Super Bowl caliber team. We've never had a guy that is the franchise quarterback that we need. And like, I know you asked about it, and I don't know if I have the answer for it either, but what did Sean do to like earn his contract? I mean, he's shown that he's a great quarterback overall. Like, can he get a team to the playoffs? I mean, he can, but he can't always overcome certain situations. His last year before he sat out, he wasn't able to take the team and do anything with it, despite losing DeAndre Hopkins. They just weren't able to overcome any of that. And part of that's because of Bill O'Brien, but, it's also because the team was kind of a mess. And I think Deshaun, like Dak sometimes, can make up his stats in garbage time for the most part. And that might fool you into thinking, man, he's a lot better than he is. Not saying Deshaun's not. Deshaun's a good quarterback still. And as a person, you don't really know because you don't know what to believe, honestly. That's what's tough about this whole situation. Is you don't know, like, what's true, what's false. So many women coming forward and saying this about him. There's got to be something there. But and to say they deserve this much money, it's really just because Cleveland, like, needs something. The Falcons and the Saints were the final teams that were, like, all in on Deshaun, but they weren't going to give him this guaranteed contract. They weren't going to give him this $203 million guaranteed. Cleveland was desperate enough to say Baker is not the guy for us. We think Deshaun is a franchise quarterback, and we don't really care about his baggage. We're going to pay him and hope for the best. That's what it was.
Yeah,
really.
that's a good way to put it. And I pitch it like this: like the NFL is the most "what have you done for me lately" league.
Yeah,
and like the Cleveland Browns went completely against the grain and within the grain. With Baker Mayfield, they went within the grain. What have you done for me lately? You tore your labrum, you're hurt, you're damaged goods. That's how they saw Baker Mayfield. I don't see him that way. I'm not saying I've ever been the biggest Baker Mayfield guy. I went on the record saying that it was a horrible first overall pick, and I don't take that back. I look at just the first overall pick. That's the best player. The team that has that pick and takes that player, they believe that that guy is the, above all, best player in the draft. There were better players in the draft overall than Baker Mayfield. Saquon Barkley was one of them, and that's my take on that. But they did end up getting Nick Chubb, so I can't, be a hater on Nick Chubb. I love Nick Chubb. He's been a fantasy godsend for me on multiple occasions. But to what you were saying about Watson, what has he done lately outside of quit on his team and in the Houston Texans, regardless of whether he should or shouldn't or whatever the reasons were, he did it. As well, I can't say what we should or shouldn't believe out of this whole situation. I don't know what to believe, as you said. But what I do know is it seems like Deshaun Watson has a horrible habit of putting himself in horrible situations. At the very least, surrounding himself with the wrong people / possibly, allegedly, we'll say, doing the wrong things. And if I am a NFL owner, I'm looking at that. I'm a smart businessman to be able to have my net worth so high that I could buy an NFL team that I wouldn't say to myself, I'm going to buy into that. I'm going to buy into that guy. I know Baker Mayfield, they saw him as damaged goods, and he very well might be. They might not even be wrong about that. But what I also know is Deshaun Watson is a headache, and I don't think he's that great, to be honest with you. I think he's shown flashes of greatness, but I don't think he's a considerable improvement from Baker Mayfield. If Baker Mayfield was so bad, there were other options that you could have gone after that weren't as much of a headache as Deshaun Watson. But the Browns will be the Browns. They will do what they do best. And, man, I feel sorry for the Browns fans. You mentioned earlier that Jimmy Haslam's asking for money towards a dome for their stadium. You're going to make those moves and then ask the fans for money? That's a tough sell. That's a real tough sell. But hey, it's going to be interesting. But let's get down to the subject matter at hand here, what I'd like to talk about the most here on the show, and that is our beloved Buffalo Bills. This is the Buffalo Bills season preview. Every single week I've tried to have as many guests on as I possibly could have, and it's always interesting. There's times where Mondays I like to do the show, Wednesdays I like to do the show. Here I am, I'm doing the show on a Tuesday. It's the first time I've done the show on a Tuesday in a really long time. And I had a longtime pal, Erik Ellis, joining me on the show tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed it. But we're going to get down to the Buffalo Bills. It's this simple. We have to start with the misery first, and then we'll get into the good stuff. Define what 13 seconds means to you.
Agony, pain. It's just the worst feeling in the world. I can't even begin to describe it, to be honest with you. You know, I honestly do believe if they had stopped the Chiefs there, they are going to the Super Bowl and they're winning it. I have no doubt in my mind they would have done it. And it's just it baffles me that this occurred, this 13 seconds that you know, it's the curse of the Bills, honestly, that we have to, you know, deal with this, you know, wide right, the drought, the Music City Miracle. It's like, can we just stop, please? Just a Super Bowl at this point, just one. Like, I can't do this. This is just too much with all of this. And the 13 seconds is just another added like notch on the belt of misery for us. And you know, I think things could have been a lot different if that game had been played here in Buffalo. But, you know, unfortunately, things didn't go the way we had wanted to during the regular season. The Chiefs had the higher seed. They were able to have that home field advantage. And I think that does play a slight factor in it. Obviously, I think a 13-second factor would be that kind of thing that would be related to what occurs and it gives them that advantage. But you know, it just the Chiefs never seem to really play here. They played here one time and it was without the fans. And it just I would love to see, you know, them come here to the playoffs, deal with the Bills fans here. I think if that game is played here, I honestly think there's no 13 seconds. I think the Bills stop them out. I think they win very handedly. And that's what makes the 13 seconds so painful. Is like it was so preventable. It was a situation that never should have happened. And it sucks that we have to reflect on it and have to think about it until the next season starts.
I was on mute, my bad. And I say, like, the fact that there's always one time I'm on mute and I say something. That just happens. I always do that. What the hell? Anyway, there's always one time where I say that to myself, like all the things you said. There's one time, like, throughout a week since that game happened where, like, I'm sitting at home and I'm playing Madden or I'm watching some highlights from last year. It's like watching a movie where you know how it ends. And when you know how it ends and it's a disappointing ending and it's a heartbreaking ending, you never forget it. And that's the thing. I'll always remember that, whether they win the Super Bowl this year or not. Like, it's always going to be, well, there was that one game against Kansas City where they had a lead in 13 seconds and Kansas City tied it and then they beat us in overtime. And if I'm feeling that way, like as a fan, and if you're feeling that way as a fan, I could not imagine how, in particular, Josh Allen felt after that game. That had to be the most crushing moment in his professional career, at the very least in his entire football career, quite possibly. And if we're feeling that way, Josh Allen's got to be feeling that way too, which then leads me into, the albeit corny but motivational factor of the fact that this is supposed to be the year. This is the year. Like this year, 2022, 2023, they come back from that 13-second loss, put their boots on, and kick some ass. That's what my expectation is. Like the anger has to be at an all-time high in terms of focus and refocus and getting back to brass tacks and getting back to that point in the playoffs, whether it's a divisional game against Kansas City or an AFC championship against Kansas City. My point in that is I know that the AFC got a lot better this offseason. You saw Devontae Adams go to the Raiders. You saw Tyreek Hill go to the Dolphins. We make fun of it all the time. Tua can't hit the broadside of a barn, let alone throw it, 10 yards. So we'll see how that. We'll see if we're wrong on that. I don't think we are, but I think we both agree that Tua sucks. We'll just throw it out there for the Dolphins fans. But I think the two best teams in the NFL are the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills. I don't see that changing because you have the game's most important position on one team with Pat Mahomes and the game's most important position on another team in Josh Allen. Those guys are to what Tom Brady and Peyton Manning were for this generation. Those guys will go head to head year in, year out. And we know one thing. If 13 seconds didn't teach us anything, it taught me that game was not about what we thought it would be about. We thought it would be about Josh Allen going up against Kansas City. It wasn't. It was about Josh Allen whooping Kansas City's ass pillar to post and Kansas City's defense having no answer for Josh Allen whatsoever. And Pat Mahomes showed in that little window his greatness as well as the areas on the Bills defense that must improve and enter in, Von Miller. We were meeting up. We were actually throwing the football around when I'm meeting you at a elementary school lot to throw the ball around the lot, and I tell you that the Bills sign. You see the Bills sign Von Miller. I call you on the way. How big of a signing is that? We saw. The I think it cut out there. You still with me?
Yeah, I am. I think it's a huge move. I think
awesome.
Von Miller is in prime, but he's still one of the top edge rushers in the league. And you make this move because you've got these guys on this team that need to learn how to do this. Rousseau, Basham, Epinesa, even Edmonds to an extent can learn something from Von Miller. And you are so defense heavy team. And that's what makes me a little bit irritated is that you go first, second round picks for defense. Your defense should be able to stop 13 seconds if that's what you're doing. The offense goes through Josh Allen, and I get that. You've got some good players that you don't need first or second round picks through necessarily. So Dawson Knox, Singletary, Gabe Davis, all these guys you didn't get in the first or second round that have turned out to be studs. So I got to give them credit for that. But you haven't found that on defense. And that's why you bring in Von Miller because this guy can be a difference maker. And you saw it in the Super Bowl. You saw this guy is going to, bring some pressure, take some time away from the quarterback to make a quick decision that he will regret. And it might also give them more opportunities for somebody like Ed Oliver to come through the middle and take him down for a sack. These are things that you're trying to do to prevent 13 seconds from ever happening again. And I think that's something that's huge for the Bills. And I hope Von Miller makes a huge impact going forward for the Bills and leads us to multiple Super Bowls, ideally. I would just love nothing more than that, personally.
And what gets lost in the whole Von Miller signing is the same day, the same night that the Bills signed Von Miller, they signed O.J. Howard. And what really I would really want to hammer home is for all the things I love about Josh Allen. I love the athleticism. I love that he can scramble. I love that he can throw a deep ball better than just about anybody. He's got the greatest arm in the league, bar none. The one thing that scares me about everything we've seen from Josh Allen is the fear that that athleticism is a double-edged sword. Live by the sword, die by the sword. Josh Allen's been playing with fire the last 4 years with his running ability at 6'5", 245 pounds. I'm hoping that O.J. Howard, James Cook, these two new weapons, as well as Jamison Crowder, as well as maybe, just maybe, a long in the tooth Tavon Austin, if he pushes the envelope and makes the team. I'm hoping that those new additions take away a little bit, not fully. I don't want to fully taken out of his game, but take away a little bit of Josh Allen's hero ball that could potentially get him hurt. Because let's face it, this is, as I said, a quarterback-driven league. If Josh Allen goes down, God forbid, Case Keenum, nothing against you, my man, but you are no Josh Allen. There is a massive drop-off from Josh Allen to Case Keenum. I think Case Keenum is a damn good backup. And the fact that the Bills got him how they got him is another, wow moment. I really worried about who the Bills were going to get as their backup quarterback. You go out and trade a 7th-round draft choice for a guy that's played with Stephon Diggs, had the Minneapolis Miracle with Stephon Diggs. Can't get any better than that. But
No.
if Josh Allen goes down, that would drastically hurt their chances at what we hope that they can accomplish. But I'm hoping that these new additions with James Cook and O.J. Howard can provide check down opportunities, as well as Jamison Crowder, who I really think is going to be a big, big addition to this team. He hasn't been talked about nearly enough by any of the other podcasts out there, any of the other shows. I think he's being overlooked. And I don't know if that's because of Gabriel Davis and Dawson Knox already being on the team from last year, of course. But you got to look at the new additions and what they can provide. And I think Jamison Crowder can provide you a lot because he's shown that with really bad quarterbacks, with quarterbacks that are nowhere near as talented as Josh Allen. I want your thoughts on that. James Cook is another addition to this team that I think is a fun one. And talking about the draft with Kaiir Elam and James Cook, you mentioned going D-line, Epinesa, Ed Oliver, Boogie Basham, and Gregory Rousseau. What were your thoughts on the 2022 Buffalo Bills draft this year with Elam and Cook specifically?
I liked him actually. We do need another corner. We've lost Levi Wallace. Dane Jackson he's a guy that you can have in there, but you don't know what you're going to get. Tre'Davious White's injury is definitely a huge factor in why you have to draft this guy and this kid and hope for him to be a stud. And honestly, it looks like he will be. Honestly, I have better hope for him being a better cornerback than Sauce Gardner, to be honest. Just because I think Kair's played with better competition in college. I think Sauce has got a lot of potential too, but I think Kair's going to be in a good system. He's going to be with a good secondary. He's going to learn very quickly what to do and what not to do. So I'm hopeful for him in the long term that he'll be another stout corner for the Bills to have. With James Cook, I'm really excited for him. We both love Delvin Cook for the Vikings, and we think he's great in fantasy, but we also think he's a great running back. And the Bills need this running back help. As much as we love seeing Josh Allen throw the football, you can't rely on Josh Allen alone all the time because eventually defenses are going to start blitzing him to no end. And, Josh can do pretty well against the blitz, but eventually one of the offensive linemen might slip up and, Josh Allen's on the bad end of a sack or a tackle. And there goes Case Keenum, like you said. So, with James Cook, you've got a lot more flexibility in play calling. You've got a lot more maybe power runs or maybe just more not checkdowns necessarily, but Josh may have more faith in James Cook to get 10 yards instead of Devin Singletary getting maybe 5 and Zach Moss, no offense, getting maybe like 3 or 2, it just seems like James Cook's got a lot more dynamic ability than Singletary and Moss do right now. So I definitely love the draft pick. I think he was a steal in the second round. He arguably could have been a first round draft pick. So I'm glad we actually did get him in the second. And I'm honestly looking forward to seeing Khalil Shakir, I think, play as well. I haven't heard much about him yet in terms of OTAs and camp, but I think he's got potential from what I've heard and seen to be a big factor in the Bills' offense going forward.
Yeah, he's definitely a sleeper. Everything that I've heard is that the guy is smooth. Everything he does is just straight to a point in terms of just nice all around. Great route runner, great hands, great catch in traffic, great yards after catch. I mean, I see him as a guy that in open space, in space on a wide receiver screen, isolated on his own one on one, he's a problem. He's somebody that's going to be a real problem. And the fact that they have added weapons upon weapons, yeah, they lost Cole Beasley, but they signed Jamison Crowder. I think that's an upgrade. Pardon me for saying that. I would say so. I mean, Isaiah McKenzie arguably is an upgrade over Cole Beasley with how Isaiah McKenzie stepped up to the plate when Cole Beasley was taking on his 58th fine for the season. I mean, it was terrible. That was a whole situation that I was not happy about, and I'm glad that they moved on. I hate to say that. I don't want to throw shade at Cole Beasley in any way, but at the same time, protocols are protocols, and you want to follow them, great. If you don't, you're going to have to pay up. That's just the way the NFL worked. So during COVID, and that is what it is. No one wanted to do it, but you got to do what you got to do. I feel like that the offense has even more potential than what I saw last year. And you know as well as anyone, whether it's me on here or whether it was me talking to you off of being here on our daily conversations about the Bills, I don't want to say I hated Brian Dable, but there were moments where I wished I could just shake him. Like, in terms of the ability that the offense had, I wanted to just take him by his shoulders and be like, you moron. Like, let's fully encapsulate what this offense is capable of, and we'll be even better than what we are. And I think Ken Dorsey is going to do that. I trust, maybe I'm nuts, but I trust Ken Dorsey with his college background, with his background with Cam Newton as well, during Cam Newton's great years in Carolina, not the bad ones, to actually fully use what you have at your disposal. And you got a lot. You got a lot to work with. Just doing a sweep with Isaiah McKenzie and a check down to Dawson Knox, it's not enough. These guys are multi-talented, multifaceted players that can do a lot of different things. And I think Ken Dorsey is going to allow that to be seen. I think that's a huge question mark to the season in terms of how Dorsey's going to run the offense. But from everything I'm hearing, the players are really enjoying what Dorsey is implementing in the playbook. So
yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on, to end the show? Obviously we have Super Bowl expectations for the Bills, and we both think that they can get it done this year. I think I want to be on the record and just straight to the point in saying that. But in terms of the AFC East, is there anything about the AFC East that makes you fearful that the Bills can't win the AFC East like they have the last two seasons?
Not really. Miami's done some things that make me a little bit skeptical, but Josh Allen's always been like their kryptonite. So, I mean, you get Tyreek Hill, you got Waddle, Gesicki. I mean, I'm really surprised their defense was able to stay so consistent despite Flores leaving and everything else there. But you're paying all these guys so much money. I think it's going to play a big factor into next year. Not so much this year. I think, they're still going to try to have to gel and figure things out this year. So by the time next year comes around, you're going to have a few guys who are going to test the free market and see what else they can get. And then other guys who you're paying way too much for. And, that's going to affect everything else too. You're going to have to cut certain guys and trade other guys. But Miami's probably the second best team in the division by far. The Jets are still in a rebuild process. A lot of people like their draft, and I think their draft was really good. I don't think it's going to matter right now. I think there's a, and with Zach Wilson and all this stuff going on with him, that's another thing with the Jets that I think it's just kind of, it is what it is at this point. I don't know if it's going to really affect the season too much, but I definitely think it can be a little bit of a distraction. When people find out certain things like this about you, whether they're true or not, that's going to get in your head and get in teammates' heads. Other players saying something or, a fan saying something, and that can really like derail a season just because, you're already in a tough division. You've got two teams that are generally better than you on paper. So now you've got to deal with, this rigmarole and rookies who are still trying to figure their place out in the NFL. So the Jets are going to be in for a tough time too, I think. And then the Patriots, I don't know what to expect with them. Bill Belichick's still Bill Belichick, and Mac Jones isn't bad, but he's no Tom Brady. And in terms of weapons, I mean, they really don't have much. They have Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, which are fine, but you don't utilize them the way they need to be utilized. And they have no receivers. I mean, who are they throwing to? Like they're not throwing at anybody like that would make me nervous or scared. And their defense is minimal. They've already lost J.C. Jackson. You've lost one of your top corners. I mean, he was
where did J.C. Jackson go?
Oh, the Chargers.
That's right. Wow, that's a big loss.
Yeah, and I mean, J.C. Jackson was Stephon Diggs' son, so I mean, I wasn't too worried about him either way. But it's just you lose this guy who's still like a really good corner. What do you expect is going to happen this year? I mean, you're not going to catch Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis or Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. These guys are going to run circles around you. Bill Belichick and the Patriots, they could very well be in last place in the division, which is something, like 3 years ago, you and I would have been like, that's never happening. But, Tom Brady leaves your team and everything goes to the dumpster fire. That is, the Patriot way now, which we've now learned is the Brady way. And that's why they kept winning. So in terms of the AFC East, I honestly think the Bills potentially sweep. I think they may have one loss in the division. I don't know if that's to the Dolphins or potentially to the Patriots just because Bill Belichick can sometimes get us. But I honestly think they either sweep or they go 5-1 and they win the division fairly handily.
Man, I love how you said the Patriot way was the Brady way all along because we would even debate that like back in the day, like who deserves more credit, Tom Brady or Bill Belichick? And I think at the time, more people then would say Bill Belichick, but now you look back on Brady and knowing who Brady is more, as a competitor and as a leader and just as an overall personality and what he can do to a locker room and what he can bring onto a team. Based on all those things, as he did with Tampa Bay, getting Fournette, getting Gronk, getting all the guys that he was able to bring on board. When he signed with Tampa Bay, that showed us, hey, it leans Brady. It's about 70-30 Brady in terms of the Brady-Belichick, if not more. And I'm being generous to Bill saying that. But I think at this point, the only thing I have to say about the Patriots, and this is something that I am just flabbergasted by, I haven't even brought it up to you off the show or off the air, if you want to say it that way in conversation. The fact that when you go on the Patriots website or when you go and look up the New England Patriots and their coaching staff, at this current point, and I don't know if it's going to continue, but at this current point, the offensive coordinator of the New England Patriots is Matt Patricia.
Yep. Yeah. Former
defensive coordinator of the Patriots turned head coach of the Lions, who made Matt Stafford so frustrated that he almost retired and moved on just so he could get out of the contract with Detroit, begged for a trade out of Detroit, made it happen for himself, and obviously we know how that turned out. But I don't know what the Patriots are doing, and if I don't know what the Patriots, like usually with a team, outside of Jacksonville, of course, I can make up kind of what they're trying to do like to what they're trying. Like I can't understand paying Zay Jones $30 million, but I can kind of understand what some of the other teams are trying to do. With the Patriots, I just don't know. I think Mac Jones has a lot of potential. I really do. I don't think he's Tom Brady. I think the national media gassed him up far too soon and made themselves look like idiots for doing so. But I think Mac Jones is far better. The potential is definitely there. The throws, the accuracy, the anticipation, the pocket presence. He's got a lot to his game that would make you think that he's got the potential. Far more potential than Zach Wilson, to be quite honest with you. And far more potential than Tua. And we talk about Tua all the time in terms of like, I know what he was at Bama. I know how good he was. I watched it. I saw it. I saw him make throws that were unbelievable on the run. But once he had that hip injury at Bama, he was never the same. And I think that rings true now. I thought when they benched Ryan Fitzpatrick to put Tua back in, I thought it was a massive mistake. That was the best Ryan Fitzpatrick we've ever seen, including the one we saw in Buffalo. And I thought that it was crazy that they benched Ryan Fitzpatrick for Tua at that time when the playoffs were still on the line. And now I look forward, moving forward from that. I think the Jets have had a really good few drafts, but I don't know about Zach Wilson. I don't think the Jets know about Zach Wilson because they've invested in their offensive line and their run game. They haven't necessarily invested in top flight receivers because they know that they don't believe they don't know if they have the quarterback that can get the receiver the ball. So why invest in the receiver at a high price when you don't know if you have the quarterback yet? So they're building a run game, building a physical defense, and being like an old school, New York Jet football team, which is fine. I don't have anything against that. But is that good enough to beat the Buffalo Bills? I don't think so. Is what the Dolphins doing, in terms of spending and spending and spending. They spent more money this offseason than any team in the National Football League, including the Rams. So, I don't know what to make of what these teams are doing, where it seems like the Bills built themselves for the long haul, where these teams are trying to catch up, and they're playing catch up, and it's obvious. So I see the Bills being the beast of the East for a very long time. Potentially the next 3 to 4 years especially, but potentially longer, depending on how these rebuilds with those three teams, as we mentioned, pan out. But, man, if you were to put a record prediction on what the Bills will do this year, where would you put it right now?
If I had to, I would probably go 12-5.
12-5, okay. I don't mind that. My expectations are a little bit higher. I would say 13-4, maybe 14-3. But I like 12-5 because it's doable. It's modest. It's not overzealous. I just think that could you imagine if the Josh Allen that played in that Kansas City game rolls over into week 1 of this year, which it could happen. I'm not saying that's best case scenario, but what if that happens? What if that does happen?
Then they go 17-0 at that point. I'm just saying, like, God forbid we have another like Manning curse and we lose to a team we should never even like have a conversation of losing to. Sometimes it happens. You don't know what can happen. I don't expect a perfect season all the time, but if Josh continues to be what he is, 14-3 is a serious possibility, and it probably is likelihood. I'm just giving the benefit of the doubt because 12-5, we're still the Buffalo Bills, and I gotta see it before I go the full extent right now. That's my main thing.
I love it. Well, man, it was a pleasure having you on the pod. Greatly appreciate you hopping on. We got to do this more often. Maybe we'll do a weekly guest spot where I have you hop on the show. Why not?
Do a Bills reaction thing, like every
yeah.
Right to the
post
game,
post game shows. I'm down. Yeah. I'm down for that.
Yeah,
down for that for sure. I think so. I know last year it seemed like there were games, as you mentioned, the Jacksonville game, the Indianapolis game. There were games last year where I didn't even know if I wanted to do this anymore. Like I just said to myself, I can't do this. I can't. And then those games happen. And then the 13 seconds game was what was to come, and we didn't even know it yet. We were so innocent in the fact that we had no idea what was coming, and we had to just take the kick in the teeth. Horrible.
So sad.
I got to mention to you, I don't know if you saw this. I know that there's Bills fans that tune into the show, but they also know I talk about mixed martial arts. Did you happen to see that Hamzat Chimaev is fighting Nate Diaz September 10th?
I heard that. I think it's verbal right now. I don't know if it's contracts. Yeah. But that should be exciting. That should be a really good fight.
That's a very exciting fight, and it's a turn of events because it was like Nate Diaz was just ready to get out of the UFC, and then they made him an offer that he couldn't refuse, apparently, because it seems like he's verbally agreed to fighting Hamzat, which is a fight that they've wanted for quite some time. I'm curious because I'm on one hand I'm excited, but on another hand I feel like the prospects of seeing Conor versus Nate 3 are dead right now.
In all honesty, and I hate saying this, I don't think there's a lot of hope for Conor to go back to the UFC at this point. I mean, dude's made his money. I mean, he can really do whatever he wants to do. I think he fights again. I don't know when that is or who it's against. With him, he's made his money, made his fame. He can do whatever he wants at this point. And I think it's just tough to say, him and Nate will run it back again. He'll go to 170 and fight there. It's just, I don't know. I was a huge Conor fan for so long, and I still am in a way. I want to see him fight. Obviously, everyone does. And what he's done recently is just kind of live his life, and I can't fault him for that. But I don't know if and when we'll see another Conor fight, and if it's with Nate Diaz, that'd be great. I'd love to see a part 3, but I'm not getting my hopes up yet.
I don't blame you. I'm following him on social media, and I see Conor at parties drinking shots. And hey, I'm not saying we haven't been there before, but what I am saying is I'm not trying to fight. I'm not trying to get punched in the face. I'm not training and then training by day, putting all that work in during the day, and then going out to a party and putting shots in my belly at night. I don't see that fire that we saw from 2015. That fire and the build up to the Chad Mendes, ultimately the Aldo fight, but Chad Mendes fight, Mendes Aldo, like that Conor McGregor was a world beater. That guy, I'd put him up against anybody, and he was just knocking anyone out that he touched. So, I go back to that and think, man, that was such a fun time to be a fan. And it was a long time ago, 7 years ago, and a lot has changed, obviously, in the fight game since. Israel Adesanya wasn't around. Francis Ngannou wasn't around. Kamaru Usman wasn't around. Those are the three guys that are ruling the sport right now. So, absolutely. It's gonna be very interesting to see how that pans out. But man, this was a fun one. I enjoy hopping on with you. Enjoy having you on, and you enjoy the rest of your night with that golden retriever.
I will. I'll give him a big old walk in a little bit and see how it goes.
See if you can throw him a touchdown pass.
I'll try. Now, go for it. We'll see.
All righty, take care, buddy. Thanks for hopping on.
All right, man. Go Bills.
Go Bills. That was Erik Ellis, longtime pal of yours truly. We go way, way back. I thought, you know what? I haven't had Erik on the show in a long time, and I wanted to get him on because he's fun to talk to. He's the vast majority of my conversation off the air in terms of who I'm talking to and what are the talking points that I'm kind of cultivating in conversation with him to put on the show. And I thought, you know what? Let's get him on. Let's talk. Let's discuss this stuff. So hope you enjoyed the show. I appreciate you guys tuning in. This is a pre-recorded version of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. The Thomas Take Sports Podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. So thank you so much for tuning in. Go Bills. Plenty more to come as we inch closer and closer to the 2022-2023 Buffalo Bills regular season.